It's tomato season and August party theme is Tomato Girl Summer, so let's get ready. August is perfect for celebrating tomatoes. It was the theme of our party. I wanted to do tomato girl vibes, celebrating summer and a slower approach, savoring things like fresh tomatoes. So it made up most of our menu. We went with an appetizer, lunch, and the whole party was so much fun. So let me show you exactly how I pulled it all together for our August dinner party. There were a few fun decor pieces for our Tomato Girl party, including this vintage cream and sugar that I stumbled upon at the thrift store and knew would be perfect. Fun fact, I don't love the color red, so I don't have a lot of red serving pieces or tablecloths or napkins. So I wanted to add red in some other smaller elements, like these beautiful little menus that are available as a free printable on my website. You can open the Canva template and put all your own food items on them. I printed them and cut them out to add to the table. I also wanted to paint some candles. I did this for the Little Women party and they turned out really cute, and I thought it would be a fun addition for this party. So I used regular white taper candles just from the dollar store and regular acrylic craft paint. I did some of them with cherry tomatoes on them that were connected with a green stem. And then I did others with just one regular tomato. Adding the stems was a little tricky because it's so tiny, but basically you need a really fine paintbrush to do this little detail. And then for the cherry tomatoes, I just did a stem to connect them all. And they turned out really, really cute, and they burn just fine like regular candles. Another easy and inexpensive way I added some tomato red to my table was using this pretty ribbon to tie my regular white linen napkins. I got it at the fabric store on clearance and tied every napkin with a pretty bow. One of my favorite little details for this table, which really helped bring in some more red and our tomato theme, was making these little party favors. I used a Ferrero Rocher. They're delicious and they're Italian, so they fit our theme well. And I just wrapped them up with some red streamers that I found at the party store. I did find it was hard to make the tomato look smooth, so I ended up folding the crepe paper in half for the last few layers, and that really helped. And then I cut out some stems with the green streamers and glued them on with a glue stick, and I think they're adorable, and they were actually really fun, like a little prize pack for my guests to unwrap at the table. I love adding all these little DIYs to the table. Of course, for a tomato party, you're gonna need some tomatoes. In fact, lots of tomatoes. So I went to the farmer's market. I was very happy to find some heirloom ones, some really beautiful grape and cherry ones, and then some regular beefsteak. Let's get on to our cooking. I knew I wanted the party menu to be all appetizers and heavily inspired by tomatoes, although I did have a few non-tomato dishes. I wanted to do some charcuterie, cheese and crackers, and I decided to make my homemade crackers. I've made these many times in the past, but not recently, and I almost forgot how good they are. It's a really simple dough that comes together really quickly with no like mixer or anything. You just stir together this flour and olive oil dough. And then the goal is to roll these crackers out as thin as possible. The thinner they are, the better they are. So you want to be able to basically see through this dough. Then you just brush it with a little olive oil, and I like to sprinkle it with some salt. You can flavor these crackers with any kind of herb or spice, but honestly, I like them just with some coarse pepper in the dough and then sprinkled with flaky sea salt. I like to roll them out into these kind of baton-shaped pieces and then break them up for a charcuterie board. I first had these many years ago at a party, and I was so impressed. I was like, how did they make their own crackers? So I did a bit of research, found a recipe I like, and tweaked it a little, and I think you will love these too. And guests are always impressed with homemade crackers. Once that was together, I moved on to dessert. I knew I wanted a nod to tomatoes for the dessert as well, but I didn't want to go full on tomatoes. Some people make like a tomato ice cream or a tomato cake with real tomatoes in it. I landed on making these tomato-shaped cookies, and they turned out so great. You make this simple dough, dye most of it with food coloring to this bright red and then a little bit of green. Then you just roll them to look like little cherry tomatoes, add a tomato stem on top, and bake them. Now, this was my first time making these, and I was a little bit nervous that once I baked them, they were going to flatten out and not keep this beautiful round cherry tomato shape. I just took these out of the oven. They smell great. I can see there's a couple cracks, but overall, they look so good. They really held their shape. These are basically a little butter cookie, and they were the perfect accompaniment to the rest of the dessert I made, to just add like a little texture on the side and to look like the most perfect little cherry tomatoes. So this was one of my favorite elements from the whole party. Along with the cookies, the main element of dessert was panna cotta, which I thought was the perfect Italian addition. And to make my panna cotta fit my strawberry theme a little bit better, I wanted to make a red berry sauce to go with it. So I just cooked up some frozen strawberries with a little sugar and lemon, and then I pureed it so it was nice and smooth, and it was the perfect accompaniment. Next up was making the panna cotta itself. And although I really love panna cotta and I've had it lots of times, it's always been made by my youngest daughter. She loves to bake, and she started making this when she was a kid, and I just had never made it. Now, there was one time that she made it, which was actually for a party, and it didn't set. So I kind of had that in my mind, like maybe this is quite tricky to make, but it's actually pretty simple. It comes together really quickly, and I will definitely be making it more in the future. I thought it would elevate the dish to use vanilla paste instead of regular vanilla, but I came to regret that decision later. I thought I would mold it in some little ramekins, but I was surprised when I went to my cupboard and I could only find a few. I guess I never had a full set, or they've gotten broken over the years. So I ended up using these small glasses, and that worked really well. Put them in the fridge to set overnight, and nervously checked on them every few hours, and I was very relieved when I could see that they were setting properly. I made the crackers a couple days before the party, and then the day before the party, I worked on the dessert, and my last thing that day was to make some meatballs. One of my guests was gluten-free, so I didn't add the breadcrumbs until after I made hers, but mixed these together and then seared them in a frying pan to add a little color. They weren't cooked through. Then I let them cool and put them in the fridge overnight, so the next day for the party I could just simmer them in the sauce and finish cooking, and that worked out really well as a make-ahead. I asked all my guests to wear tomato colors, so I wore this green dress and red shoes and these delightful little tomato earrings. Since this party was tomato and Italian themed, I knew I wanted to host it outside under my pergola because there's beautiful grapevines growing. So when I booked my guests, I actually checked that if it rained the day of the party, they could come the next day. It did in fact rain, so I sent them a text the day before, said let's move it to the next day. And on the day of the party, the weather was beautiful. I started out by setting the table. I went with this green gingham tablecloth. It's one I made at Christmas, and it's a great tip if you need a tablecloth and you don't have one that fits your theme, grab some fabric from the fabric store. The table was looking pretty green at this point, so we started bringing in all those pretty red accents, our vintage cream and sugar, all those beautiful tomatoes from the farmer's market, some tomato cans. Look for good Italian tomatoes with beautiful labels, and I put herbs in those, basil and curly parsley and flat parsley. Our menu cards were another great pop of red. Also, I wanted to set all the food down the center of the table, and it can be a little overwhelming to people, so seeing all the options right in front of them on their menu is a helpful thing. I also added the tomato party favors, and then one last quick little DIY was to use some of the actual tomatoes as candle holders. I just cut out the middle, added in some candles, and tied some red ribbon to them, and they were, again, a really fun addition to the tomato party. I really loved how this table all came together and turned out. Sometimes you have a vision in your mind and you're not sure if it's really going to get there in the end, but this table did, and it was lovely to be in the shade of the grapes under the pergola. Then it was time to finish up all the food before the guests came, so we cooked those meatballs in the sauce. We put together some pizzas. I made a pepperoni Life is a Party pizza, and then I made another one with cherry tomatoes and peppers on it. My daughters and my husband did a lot of this cooking with me. We also made some sauteed mushrooms for a little mushroom bruschetta, and then one of my daughters put together a fresh tomato bruschetta. My husband cooked off the pizza. We had frozen mozzarella sticks to cook as well, and heated up some garlic bread. And we plated the little meatballs, and that was it for the hot. So then it was just putting together all the charcuterie different elements and bringing all the food outside. A little tip was that we tried to make 2 servings of each one, so I could put one on each end of the table so that everyone could reach everything, and that worked really well. Once everyone arrived in their tomato colors, we sat out in the garden. We had some Italian drinks, wine and Italian sodas, and then it was time to eat. I feel like appetizers are often everyone's favorite part of a meal, so why not make a whole meal out of them? And it fit our tomato theme perfectly. So here's what we had for dinner. For the hot items, we had our pizzas that I made with store-bought dough and added different toppings too, and these were a real hit and a nice addition, a kind of more hearty addition to the appetizers. Then there were our homemade meatballs that I plated individually and just grated a little fresh Parmesan on top of, mozzarella sticks, garlic bread with our bruschetta. Our charcuterie boards were loaded with meats, 5 cheeses, veggies, dip in a tomato, melon and prosciutto, different chutneys and jams, tomato jam, bocconcini cheese. Everything was so delicious. After a long and lingering lunch, everyone was happy to open their little tomatoes and enjoy their little chocolate inside.
It's like a party game. I love it.
Look at this side of it.
Whoa! All right.
Whoa!
Then it was time to serve dessert. I decided to see if I could unmold the panna cotta, but all the vanilla beans sunk to the bottom, which became the top, and didn't look great. So I decided instead to just serve them in the glasses, which worked out fine. Lesson learned though, next time I will make them with regular vanilla instead of the vanilla bean paste. I added some of the strawberries on the side and then added 2 of our little strawberry cookies, and this was such a perfect little dessert. Tomato Girl summer is all about enjoying the simple pleasures of life, and a long, lingering lunch with wonderful old friends was the perfect embodiment of that. The party's over. It was a lunch party. They came at 1 and they stayed till 6:30 p.m. So I'd say that party was a hit. What were the great things about the party, and what would I do differently if I was hosting it again? There weren't too many misses for this party. One was a small thing with the Panna Cotta. I used vanilla bean paste instead of regular vanilla, but the little seeds all sunk to the bottom. So if I were making it again, I would use regular vanilla and not try and be fancy. The other thing that I would change is that we probably had too much food, and I always try to make things feel very full and abundant, but we probably didn't need 5 kinds of cheese. So if I were doing it again, I might scale back the charcuterie a bit, but I have to say the menu was a real hit, really delicious. One of those hits as well to do with the menu was coming up with gluten-free options for my friend. It can be tricky, especially with a menu like this that had like pizza and bread, but I found some gluten-free options for those things, and crackers and mozzarella sticks at the grocery store. They might not be the best gluten-free pizza she's ever had, but I just tried to have an option for every dish that we were having so she would feel included, and she did feel included. I served it separately on its own little platter, and I don't know if it was the best pizza she ever had, but the fact that she was included meant a lot to her. She was thanking me as she left, and she started crying. And it's just a reminder to me that it's always a good idea to go the extra mile and try and make people feel included, and they really appreciate it. It was really nice having this as a lunch, and that it could extend into the evening but not be a late night. Also, this party was actually originally planned for yesterday, but it rained. I knew I wanted to shoot it outside under the pergola, under the grapevine. So when I booked my friends, I asked for a rain date. I think when you're entertaining outside, if you're able to have a backup rain date, it's really great. It poured yesterday. There's no way we could have hosted it outside, so I was really glad that we could have it today outside and the weather was beautiful. Overall, I really enjoyed this theme. All the little details like the tomato favors, painting the candles with the tomatoes, using the tomatoes as candle holders, the beautiful little menus, the tomato cookies, they all turned out really well, and they were definitely worth the effort. I highly recommend this theme. It was colorful, delicious, perfect for tomato season. I really hope you enjoyed watching this party. Thanks for being here and making life a party with me. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up and to subscribe so that you don't miss any of our monthly dinner parties.